You are listening to MCC Votes and Seats, the podcast series of the Center for Political Science of Matthias Corvinus Collegium. We provide election insights with experts and politicians.
Greetings to all of our listeners. Today we are going to talk about the parliamentary election in Bulgaria that were held on the 11th of July 2021. Our guest expert is Mr. Piotr Pietrzaak, who specializes in international relations, geopolitics and international law. Mr. Pietrzaak is a Polish national residing in Sofia who has been observing Bulgarian political developments for 10 years now. Mr. Pietrzaak is the editor-in-chief of Statu Nascendi, an English-language academic journal of political philosophy and international relations. Hey, Piotr, it is great to have you with us again.
Good morning, Valent. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the invitation.
So as to start, snap parliamentary elections were held in Bulgaria this month after no party was able or willing to form a government following the April 2021 elections. The populist party, There Is Such a People, also known as ITN, led by musician and television host Slavi Trifonov, narrowly won the most seats over a coalition of the conservative GERB and Union of Democratic Forces. ITN finished around 15,000 votes ahead of GERB. It was the first time that a GERB-led coalition had not won the most seats since the party's establishment in 2006. GERB received high support from voters from the age group from 40 to 69. Four other parties won seats in the parliament, namely the socialist BSP, the Liberal Democratic Bulgaria Alliance, the centrist Turkish Minority Party, and the anti-corruption Stand Up Mafia Out. The center-right GERB party of former Prime Minister Boyko Borisov won around 23.5% of votes. During the April ballot, Borisov sought to increase his party's share of the rural vote, making campaign stops at smaller villages. The April election showed a clear divide between rural and urban areas. Smaller towns favored established parties, while Sofia and other cities went predominantly for new opposition parties, including ITN. Many citizens have turned to anti-GRAF parties, blaming Borisov for turning a blind eye on powerful oligarchs. Nevertheless, GERB continues to benefit from public support for its efforts to modernize the crumbling infrastructure and road network and to bolster public sector pay. Piotr, would you tell us briefly, in your view, how is the political landscape after this election?
In general, traditional parties have lost their appeal to Bulgarian electorate, and that's pretty much obvious. Neither Boyko Borisov nor Kornelia Ninova of БСП have managed to gain any political support ever since April. As a matter of fact, they've lost it to the newly formed parties. Slavi Trifonov won this election. He gained 14 seats in the parliament. Democratic Bulgaria of Atanasov also gained 7 more seats in the parliament. And Maya Manilova, yes, she lost 1 seat, but she gained more support, as a matter of fact, so she gained 5%. In general, the political shakeup of Bulgarian political system continues. Some say that Bulgaria enters further political turmoil because it's rather unknown what will happen with the political outcomes now. Just few hours after the official elections have been announced, Slavi Trifonov came up with the suggestions of the new prime minister, Nikolai Vasilev, and that was a little bit premature because all of the potential coalition partners suggested that that's not the candidate which they would want to support. So it is rather unknown what will happen from now on, but on the positive note, one can say that after today's meeting with the president, Rumen Radev, during so-called Dandukov II meeting, Mr. Toshko Yordanov, the former screenwriter of Slavi Trifonov and now one of the leaders of the ITN party, he suggested that Slavi Trifonov and the party are willing to withdrew the candidacy of Mr. Nikolai Vasilev in order to secure further stability, and they are open to negotiations with Kornelia Ninova, Mustafa Karadei, Maya Manilova, and Atanasov. So the situation is very dynamic, I'd say.
Thank you very much for explaining to us who won what on this snap election. Bearing the official election results in mind, do you think GERB is ready to be the leader of the opposition in the Bulgarian parliament?
Surely GERB is acting like an opposition leader already, because basically one of the leaders of GERB suggests that they are not willing to accept any invitation from the president, and in the event that ITN is not going to form the government, which is perhaps unlikely, but in such an event, Boyko Borisov will also refuse to even attempt to do that. And to be honest, the political reality after July 2021 suggests that no political party or no sane political leader would support Boyko Borisov in any constellation, let's say. They are deemed to be in opposition. They might have to accept their loss.
I understand, and talking about the difficult situation of Boyko Borisov, the current interim government, appointed after the April vote, has accused Borisov's cabinet of spending billions of levs of taxpayer money without transparent procurement procedures, among other shortcomings. GERB denies wrongdoing and says such accusations are politically motivated. In your opinion, can we expect a legal procedure against the former GERB government's officials in future?
This will be inevitable, that the new political elites will try Mr. Borisov and his party for his mishandling of the economy and all of the corruption or allegations of his corruption. In general, this has already begun by caretaker cabinet, Mr. Stefan Yanev, especially economy minister, Mr. Kirill Petkov, who basically made number of substantiated accusations suggesting that Boyko Borisov cabinet was treating country's economy as their own fiefdom, as a matter of fact. Mr. Kirill Petkov, who is, by the way, who was economy minister in the Yanev's government, during one of the recent television interviews, revealed a couple of schemes, and the whole caretaker cabinet made its living out of revealing number of information about the activities of the Borisov's government during his 10 years in power, let's say. And I think that whatever happens from now on, whether Slavi Trifonov and his party will manage to form a government, or whether we will continue with the caretaker cabinet, this will bring more political accountability and transparency to the country. The country actually desperately needs such measures, and the results of the elections suggest that basically the younger, more educated members of the Bulgarian society actually demand it, and they demand such change now, basically.
Thank you for sharing your projections with us. We already addressed briefly that the new anti-establishment party, There is Such a People, There is Such a Nation, of musician and TV host Slavi Trifonov, came first with more than 24% in the country's second election in 3 months. ITN, his party, performed well among young voters, with 31% of voters aged between 30 and 39. The anti-establishment groupings, Democratic Bulgaria and Stand Up Mafia Out, the likely future coalition partners of Trifonov's ITN party, got 12.6% and 5% respectively. Experts claim that a coalition led by ITN may be 5 or 10 seats short to be able to govern without the support of long-established groupings such as the Socialists or the ethnic Turkish MRF party. Trifonov, the leader of ITN, intends to run a minority government instead of a coalition government. Trifonov is willing to discuss the government options with every party except for GERB. ITN did not participate in any traditional media campaigns and chose to utilize social media platforms. How do you see? Was ITN's campaign strategy useful? Is it the campaign or the anti-GERB sentiments that mobilized Bulgarian voters in July 2021?
Well, what I would say about Mr. Slavi Trifonov is that he was deeply underestimated by Bulgarians and heavily criticized by his political opponents. The very fact that within just few months of the existence of ITN, the party managed to win the election suggests that his political strategy is perfect, as a matter of fact, because, in order to win any election in such a sizable country like Bulgaria, you need to show some political program. I think that Slavi Trifonov is a very careful student of Robert Greene's 48 Rules of Power, because he adopted at least one suggestion from his book, that absence makes the heart grow fonder, because unlike other political parties and unlike other political leaders, he was not present in any political debates. His posters or the posters of his political parties or billboards were not everywhere in the cities or little towns of Bulgaria. He was very silent and retracted from political life for the last, 2-3 months, and yet he won. His anti-establishment agenda actually works. You don't need to spend millions of taxpayers' money to promote yourself and your political campaign to win election, and that's proven something. It's incredible to watch from the perspective of kind of outsider. Yes, I've lived in Bulgaria for the last 4 years, but things like that don't happen in Europe, let's say. And that also shows that Bulgarian society is really fed up with the traditional parties who not only mismanage the country, but also mismanage the political funds for the campaign. In my neighborhoods in Sofia, you could see posters attached to the beams, which doesn't make any sense from the political PR perspective. But yet political parties, the traditional political parties, mishandle their campaign. That's the result of the July election. People are generally fed up with the traditional parties. It's not only GERB or the socialists. They just have enough of what's going on in the country.
Talking about this new approach of campaigning that goes against all traditional methods, as you mentioned, in your opinion, can the rise of there is such a people be seen as an indicative of a major change in the political landscape of Bulgaria?
Some people suggest that Trifonov's party is populist, and surely it is populist in a way, but the modern democracy and the modern political parties are in general populist. What it shows in general is the fact that the political landscape of the region and Europe is genuinely changing. And it changes in favor of people with ideas, people with political vision, and people who are perceived to be outsiders of the political system. If I was about to compare Slavi Trifonov to any American politician, I would say that he is very close to Barack Obama. Because Barack Obama had this 2008 moment when he gave a lot of hope, a lot of inspiration to people, and that's why they voted for him. Slavi Trifonov secured 24% of the electorate and gained 65 seats in the parliament. And that might be just the beginning of his political career. And the only thing which is interesting is the fact that he doesn't want to take responsibility for his political movement. He is thinking about suggesting another candidate for prime minister. And if he would take an initiative here and suggested himself as a prime minister, his movement, ITN, would benefit out of that greatly. And you never know, the election might repeat itself soon, because it depends on the political parties, what they will do. It's very difficult to form a stable government, stable coalition with 4 partners. It is in favor of Cornelia Ninova and her БСП to be a part of the government, simply because if she decides to be in opposition, and there will be a lot of young Turks in her party, not young Turks in nationality, but as an idiom in English language, the young, impatient people in her party who would want to replace her. So she better be in the government, or she would have internal problems in her party. In terms of Atanasov and Democratic Bulgaria, I'm not sure what's his biggest move, because if they support ITN's claim to power, that might be good for Slavi Trifonov, but I'm not sure about their political electorate. They won 3% out of the last political election just within 2-3 months, which is great. Maya Manilova already declared that she will support Slavi Trifonov, so in her instance, she needs more time to build her political movement. And in terms of Mustafa Karadei and his ДПС, in his instance and in the instance of the Turkish minority, they are a least favorable candidate for the coalition because they are totally unpredictable. They might be kingmakers of the Bulgarian politics, but I'm not sure how they will behave now.
I understand. We will talk about the БСП and Turkish minority party later on. But for now, let's go back to Trifonov. Whether he is populist or idealist, Trifonov suggested to form a provisional technical cabinet until the parties agree upon a new government. What do we know so far about the proposed technical government?
The other political parties suggested that they will not support Nikolai Vasilev. In this instance, it could be, there is such an option that if Trifonov will not manage to form the coalition, he might form some sort of minority government. For instance, Kornelia Ninova suggested that in the event that the mandate goes to her party, she might support caretaking government of Stefan Yanev to continue with their role. In terms of Democratic Bulgaria, they are planned to be incorporated in the broader coalition by Trifonov's party. I'm not sure what will be their reaction. In general, the minority government, even if these three parties, there is such a nation, Democratic Bulgaria Alliance and Stand Up, if they come together, they would have together 112 votes in the parliament. Now that makes it 8-9 votes short to create a majority government. In the event that the Movement for Rights and Freedoms joins the party, that makes it 141 seats. But that's highly unlikely. There can be a minority government with Democratic Bulgaria and a Movement for Rights and Freedoms, but that makes it only 107 seats in the event that Democratic Bulgaria would not join the coalition. You see, there is a little bit of tension going on between the leaders of Trifonov's movement and Democratic Bulgaria, so it is unknown what will going to happen. What basically unites these parties, they are all against GERB. So maybe if they overcome their particularities and if they join a cause of forming anti-Borisov government, they can succeed. Are they interested more in the future or in the present outcomes? The future will tell us that.
Based on what Trifonov has communicated during the campaign, what actions can we expect from a future minority or coalition cabinet led by Slavi Trifonov's anti-establishment ITN?
Surely he recognizes the fact that he cannot change Bulgaria on his own. He needs coalition partners, and in the current political landscape, he needs at least another three political parties together working for common good. And even considering that he's anti-establishment, he needs to recognize that his agenda will not be delivered without someone else's support.
I understand. You already mentioned BSP or БСП, as Bulgarians call it, and the Turkish minority party. The Socialists and the ethnic Turkish party won 13.4% and 10.7% of the vote, respectively. BSP usually relies on the vote of the elderly, and it received high support from voters older than 70. However, the Socialist Party has failed to reach its voters. Why do you think the Socialists were not able to mobilize their camp? Is it the pandemic to blame for the decrease of elderly voters in Bulgaria?
Well, I think that socialists actually come to terms with the fact that their traditional support is shrinking in numbers, and the political support at around 12 to 15% might be their future. Now and in any future political elections, they might just not be as attractive as they used to be. Surely they are not leaders of opposition anymore. And the question is, who is to be blamed for that outcome? Because, the last time after the April election, after losing so much vote to new parties, the whole political leadership of Bulgarian Socialist Party resigned, except for chairwoman of БСП, Kornelia Ninova. She didn't step down back then, but now, after losing another 2%, maybe that's the time to stand down for her. Surely she can be an inspiration to many young women in Bulgaria, that's a political leader, that they can aspire to be a political leader, because in the macho type of democracy where men dominated political system of Bulgaria, Kornelia Ninova is a great leader, and I'm not being sarcastic here. She can be inspirational person. The way she speaks and the matters she talks about are very appealing to many voters, maybe not to young voters, but she talks about social justice, she talks about improving the welfare, she talks about young mothers, especially the second year of the maternity when they are paid just 380 leva per month to look after their children. Any socialist political party in Europe would be proud to have such political agenda. and Kornelia Ninova is basically speaking the socialist language. Question is why the electorate doesn't believe her. Maybe it's her, or maybe it's the time for this political formation comes to its end. We can make a comparison with United Kingdom. There were many political leaders who were exceptional, like for instance Ed Miliband or Jeremy Corbyn in recent years, Gordon Brown. They were great political leaders, but they failed to win elections. And that's why each time they lost, they decided to step down. In the next couple of weeks or months, we will see what will happen with Kornelia Ninova's future and BSP's future. And that will be also interesting to watch, because there is plenty of political leaders in the Socialist Party of Bulgaria who might replace her.
Thank you very much for your kind answer. Bulgaria's second election since April reflects deep divisions. Analysts say that, as opposed to many Southeast and Central East European countries, divisive ethnic or external enemy rhetoric was largely absent in the election campaign in Bulgaria. What do you think could be the reason for it?
From my perspective, Bulgaria is more tolerant and more open than it used to be, I suppose, even from my personal perspective of foreigner living here for, let's say, 4 years. I've never came across with any form of hostility towards myself, and I suppose that many minorities can live here happily. And yes, there are a couple of political movements like Bulgarian patriots who were very vocal during the last election and who made a point of pointing out at foreigners and various immigrants. They were trying to create such a divisive political language, but Bulgarian voters don't buy it. They don't buy it anymore. The political elites are pushing Bulgaria towards further westernization, let's say. Bulgaria is very appealing, and it's a great place to live, even for foreigners here. So that reflects in the outcome of this election, as a matter of fact.
All things considered, the future of the Bulgarian political landscape remains largely uncertain, as you mentioned. However, as far as campaign strategies and political slogans are concerned, one can observe innovative approaches and tendencies in the country that are new at European levels too. So let's keep an eye on Bulgaria. Piotr, thank you very much for sharing your most appreciated thoughts about the outcome and background of the July 2021 snap parliamentary election in Bulgaria. It is always a pleasure to discuss such topics with you. I wish you all good luck for your future endeavors as the editor-in-chief of the Statu Nascendi journal, and I wish you a nice summer holiday.
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and I'm looking forward to our future initiatives and send best regards to all of our listeners. Stay safe and have a lovely summer.